I'm Charlie Jagno, Clerk of Court of St. Leger Parish. I've been in this job since 1992, and it's been my pleasure to serve the people of St. Leger Parish as their clerk. One of the favorite parts of my job is the archives and the responsibilities and the opportunities that go along with taking care of the archives of such an old parish. We were part of Imperial St. Leger Parish when it was created. And so we have records that go way back to the 1700s. Matter of fact, this courthouse was completed in 1941, but the first courthouse was built here in about 1920, and I'm sorry, 1837. There was also a structure here in 1806. 1820, it burned down, and it burned down again in 1939. That's when the present courthouse was built. Fortunately, the records were kept in an outbuilding and they weren't lost. So we have records all the way back to the colonial period. The first clerk here was Judge Lee, and he served as a clerk from 1805 to 1807. He became the parish probate judge from 1807 and he served until 1842. Our colonial records cover a period of 1764 to 1803. They're on microfilm here and available on microfilm, and they're also at the state archives. The notarial records span the time period of 1820 to 1850, and the first parish recorder was here in 1845. We have records that are imaged and indexed in various periods from the 1800s to present, and in mid 2015 we should have a constant record that's imaged and indexed and available online from 1800 to the present day. We're pretty proud of that, and it should be completed early next year. I'd like to introduce our archivist, a former archivist who's retired now, Mr. Keith Fontenot, and he can expand on what I've told you about our records here in St. Leger Parish. Thank you.
The office here will give you emancipation papers. It will also have slave sales. The legal foreign slave trade ends in 1807. But the question is, what was smuggled into Louisiana after that time is anybody's guess. So it's what Kenneth M. Snackwood had said, the peculiar institution. It was driven by economics, greed, and people also, if you were white, you could also enter into an indentured servant contract, in which in some ways was worse than slavery, since they tried to get 20 years of work out of you in 10. So let's say man's relationship to his fellow man has always been a questionable affair. The institution of slavery goes back to ancient times, and it's probably also prevalent in other parts of the world in the present day and time. And it's an institution as old as man himself. But the records here do give, these individuals who were sold. Some were lucky, they were emancipated. You also had free people of color who had slaves and who would also emancipate their relatives in that. So again, this is a part of history that present-day society really doesn't care to look at. But again, it's part of the human history, the history of man, which has not always been very pleasant. Man is capable of great deeds, but then on the other side, they can do horrific damage and discord. And the slave records reflect a different time, a different mindset that was afoot at the time. Again, a person in 1820 could not have even imagined how we live today. You know, the quill pen was a word processor. Oil lamps with whale oil. Again, you had, you know, whaling that basically destroyed whole species of whales in that. So with the advent of modern technology, life has really changed. But there are certain parts of human history that are not very pleasant to deal with, but the records in the clerk's office will speak. They're here. They will tell you what was going on, what was important, and it shows you the human condition, which is not always a pleasant state of affairs. I would also, you know, like to bring a point about talk about the Gury family. Gurys, Fontenot's, Brignac's, Lafleur's, this bunch, we will call the Alabama French. They are in essence not Acadian. They are French Creole or Alabama French. They were in Alabama prior to 1763. The Fontenots come out of Poitou, France. Jean-Louis Fontenot was a sergeant in the French colonial marines. He lands in Mobile in the 1720s, marries a Louise Henry, and then he ultimately stationed at Post des Alabama, which is north of present-day Montgomery. He dies there in 1755. It's his sons and grandsons are the ones that will come to the Grand Prairie of Opelousas. And what is interesting is that also the Native American, the Alabama Indians and other tribes immigrated along with the French. They did not want to be under British rule. The Gurys come from Dauphin Island. Gregoire Gury had a white family and a mixed family with his slave Margarita. And there are cases in the Cabildo in New Orleans where her white siblings were having a problem with the emancipation and that. So it's a different world. You find where the records will reflect the parish or the colonial post during its time. And as time progresses, you see where different records are coming in. By 1901, the oil industry comes in. You're having oil, gas, and mineral leases that are being recorded. Land that was marginal, swampy, not of much use, becomes priceless. Later you see rights of way for pipelines. utility poles, and so forth, leases for service stations. There was even an act recorded whereby somebody had entered into a lease to run a cigar stand at the Waldorf Hotel, which is across the street from the courthouse in the 1930s. So, you know, you do not know what records you can come across. It's a large database, and there are many stories that are still in these records that need to come to light. And what I have tried to do over the years is to create an index and also image documents to make these documents much more user-friendly. However, you still have the problem with the French. Somebody asked, when will you translate all of this? I said, well, that's a good question. I think if you translate it, you would lose some of its provenance, certain intangibles that the original document presents. So what we have are contemporary copybooks, and Louisiana is the only state in the United States to keep the original documents. Other states usually give the originals to the purchaser, and they have a copy in the clerk's conveyance books. But Louisiana is different, and again, this is due to the heritage that we inherited from the French and the Spanish during the colonial era. Therefore, if you come into the office, we will be very glad to point you in the right direction and to answer any questions that you might have. As I said in the beginning, I have worked with these records for over 30 years, and again, I have been in a unique position to work with original primary documents that tell the story of not only the present-day parish of St. Landry, but most of southwest Louisiana and its rich cultural and historical heritage. Good day. Today we are going to continue our conversation regarding primary historical documents in the St. Landry Parish Clerk of Court Archives. I have had the occasion more than once over the last 35 years to help newcomers who come in to the courthouse. For instance, an individual one day, you know, he or she thinks, well, you know, family gatherings, society is changing. 50 years ago or more, people went to their grandparents every Sunday. They got together with the extended family. They knew who their grandparents were, their great uncles, their first, second cousins. And again, society did have a different mindset, and family was really important. However, today, as technology has come in, society has really changed in some ways, that there is no longer that strong family connection, which historically people did not move into a new area or the frontier alone. They usually went with a support group, a family, extended family, and so forth. So in a lot of ways, human society has changed, say, since the 1950s, 1940s. Myself, as a child, I well remember going to both sets of grandparents. And again, on the holidays, it was a very festive occasion. French was spoken, and there was a few English words that were thrown in. But it was basically a family-oriented mindset, which regrettably today seems to have fallen apart. So people now, in the early 21st century, are interested in trying to find out who they are, where did my grandfather, my family originate, and the records in the clerk of court's office are very vital in fulfilling that need. People who come to the courthouse for the first time feel rather intimidated. Again, you have the legal process, the courts that are working, and the present day work that continues. But you also have the older historical records. Marriage records, estates, probates, and so forth. One should consider it to be an adventure and also an education. First of all, if you're lucky, your parents could have purchased their marriage license here, which would give you the names of the grandparents and that. This is pretty typical, say, back to 1912. However, prior to 1912 to 1865, civil marriages do not list the parents. They do not list the age or place of birth. In fact, some of our better marriage records are some of the earlier ones, say from 1810 to 1820, where they do list the parents and the nativity or place of birth of the nuptial couple. But as one comes into the office, he or she could be overwhelmed by the different documents, the handwriting, and what do I do? Where do I go? How do I proceed? So it's not an impossible task. It does require work, long hours of looking through indices and trying to establish a line. The biggest problem is that the earlier records are handwritten, and calligraphy is very shortly disappearing from the human mindset. Computers, typewriters have made communication much easier. What I have in front of me today are two books. One is the record of the district court in 1822, And in this book in front of me is the original copybook from 1805 to 1810. You do have, however, earlier documents concerning the Opelousas Post that are housed at the Louisiana State Archives in Baton Rouge, which would go back to around 1764 with the establishment of the Opelousas Post. So again, it depends upon the individual that you are searching. In a lot of cases, if it's a common Creole name or Anglo name, you might be going back into a common gene pool. One should also consider using Reverend Hebert's Southwest Louisiana records, because the Catholic Church was very meticulous about listing parents. However, if they were married by a justice of the peace or a Protestant minister, you would only have the civil marriage, and if it does not give the parents, you have a problem. Again, census records would also help out too. But again, the enumerator who would have been taking the census might have been, say, from New England, the Midwest, and when they came into what would be considered the South of the South, or the northern Spanish borderlands, they entered into a different world. And these records in the clerk of court's office do represent that different world. The individual who comes in faces a host of unique problems. First of all, what does the document do? What is it? Is it a sale? Is it a family meeting concerning an estate or a probate? The probates are very essential in giving the researcher the material culture. What property did these people own? It was real estate, slaves, hoes, rakes, plows, livestock. Again, Opelousas is basically a frontier district, a rural district, where the wealth has always been derived from the land. Early on, it was the cattle kingdom of the United States prior to the admission of Texas in 1845. You had large vacheries, or cattle ranches in the prairie, where individuals would hire people or put their slaves there to tend the cattle. And again, the livestock was usually rounded up once a year. New calves were branded and so forth. And brands and earmarks were also very important in identifying each individual's livestock, being hogs, sheep, cattle, horses, and so forth. So it's so you're looking basically at a frontier district that was inhabited by crocodiles or alligators in the bayous, panthers, wolves, and bears.